Welcome back to part 2, guys. We are going to get in and start coloring the bird. I have it all open right here, so let's press on in and let's get to it. Now, we left off with the line art layer. As you can see, it's on layer 1. The background is separate. Make sure that those two are not collapsed because we want to add the color underneath the line art. So, we hit the plus sign, we click and hold the layer 2 option and drag it down and drop it underneath layer 1. This is where we start adding the fill. Now let's choose some colors. We want to probably choose the background colors first, and we'll go for quite a saturated sort of navy blue color. I like it. We can always play around with different colors there. Now I can do this two ways. I can either color it in like this, or I can click on the layer and just hit fill, and it'll fill in the entire layer with that solid color that you have selected. I don't want to do that though, just because a single flat color is, not the most interesting thing to look at. So we're going to select an airbrush from the brushes, and I'm just using a soft brush, and I have, as you can see, the opacity turned a little bit down, and I bumped the size up as high as possible. Now I'm going to grab the in-between color. So now we have a little bit of variation in this blue. If I take away the line art by clicking that little white circle, you could see it goes from light to dark, being darker on the bottom. Although, technically you could have it flipped the other way as well. So we'll keep that blue on a separate layer, and that's our background sky stuff. Here I'm going to create a new layer. Still, we are underneath the line art, just because these are all going to be color stuff that we can later collapse. And I'm going to choose a brown color, and we're going to go a little bit more on the saturated end, as well as, actually we can go, I think, a little bit unsaturated and not too dark. And I want to make sure that I switch out the brushes. We'll keep the fill at 100, or the opacity of the brush, and the reason for this is we can always tone it down later and blend it, according to what we like in the future. So don't worry about putting down, just a little bit of color and trying to make it look make it look like it has depth right off the bat. Just do some. It's important to get the color that you like, so just choose the color that you want and go ahead and place it in there using a full 100% or 0% opacity brush. In this case, yeah, it'd be 0. It's just a translucent, or a non-transparent or opaque, whatever the terms are. You know what I'm talking about. So we're gonna put down some brown. Now, don't worry about overlapping, because this will be a step on its own. This is something that we can do after we get the initial line art covered up. And notice that I'm not staying within the lines. That's because that's kind of the beauty of having really sloppy line art, is you clean it up as you go. So I add more color where I choose, to, and I don't have to restrict myself to being on rails. Essentially, I can just go off and do whatever I want. The downside, I guess, would be that sometimes paintings take longer because you come up with ideas on the go and everything is not predetermined, and you end up wanting to make changes. All right, so we've got some brown layered in here. Now, again, even though you might be tempted to fix these brushes, don't worry about it. Leave it on its layer, create another layer. This one is going to be the bird itself. And the bird, we still want to break him down into layers. And the reason for that is, while you could leave it all on one, essentially the reason for breaking it down, it would be easier for you to make adjustments in the future. Now, we want to, for the dark colors, let's find a mid-tone color first. We're not worried about shading. We just want to pick a good color for the bird, and I want this like red purple sort of color. and let's fill in all of the feathery areas, including the eyes, including the beak. Those we will put on separate layers when we're coloring him in later. Hopefully you guys can't hear the vacuum too loud. I guess today's cleaning day, but if you can, I apologize. I can't really do much about it, at least not at this point. I'm trying to like record this as I paint instead of doing a voiceover later, just because I don't know, I think this kind of, you can kind of understand my thought process and I can explain it a little bit better on the fly instead of having to try to look back at it and try to think about, okay, why did I do what I did? What was I thinking? I'd probably be saying that a lot about my paintings if I got to go back. I'd be like, wait, why did I do that? But that's okay. Alright, here I went out a little too far, so be sure to use the eraser and not just pick up color and start painting over it, because then you are essentially getting rid of, well, you're adding colors to the layer that shouldn't have them there, you know what I mean? Like if you're adding, let's say instead of erasing, I went and selected blue and started coloring in with the blue edge just to get rid of the red. That would be a problem because in the future you would have blue on this layer, so if you're changing background elements or something, or trying to add a little bit of fur to the edge of the bird or feathers, then you have to like mess with the blue, and instead we don't want to do that. So actually not much left here. We are going to put the feet on a separate layer. Now we want to drop them and place them underneath the bird, and the reason for that is they're behind the bird, right? So keep them on their own layer. Since we already have the silhouette of the bird kind of defined, and the interesting thing is these legs, they go on top of the branch, but we could, if we wanted to, add another layer and have the feet also sit behind the branch. It's a definite possibility, and again, that's the advantage of working with a layer. If it's a really complex piece, you know, you're most likely that's something that you would do given enough, you know, practice with layers, and if that's what you felt comfortable with. So again, I'm just filling these in, and I'm trying to sort of follow the line art, but I'm using it more as like a guide than you know, an exact way of doing it. So make sure that the feet look three-dimensional by giving them a little bit of volume and have them wrapping around the branch. Now we want to create another layer, drag it up over the feathers, and this will be the beak, and we'll just use the same exact color that we have for the legs. The difference though is because it's on a separate layer, we could change the color at almost any given time very easily, and I'll show you how to do that. I'll probably end up changing it to something like a black color, just because most birds in real life actually don't have these really yellow beaks. I guess only, or mainly, it's a tropical bird thing, and we have what seems like a robin or something along those lines. So I will I'll show you how to do that, you know, for the sake of a lesson, as well as, yeah, like a demonstration, as well as probably for design aesthetics. I'll end up going in and changing it. Now create another layer. This one will be for the eyes, and we can stay on this brown color, and we don't want to go all the way white. The reason for that is leave that for the highlights. And what I did notice, and obviously it's a pretty easy concept to understand, but when you're doing a digital painting, if you don't have the full range of complete white all the way to completely dark, then when you do any auto correcting on your painting, like auto adjust, you know, as in applying a filter in the gallery, it will do weird things. It'll fill in that range for you. So even though a lot of painters would say, you know, don't use completely black colors, in digital painting you can push that range. I tend to kind of stay away from really dark colors, but I'll just do this painting in the style that I'm used to, and then you can kind of judge for yourself. So here we have here we have the eyes, the pupils, or the iris, everything, the eyeballs colored in with one color, but we still want to do the iris and the pupils. So that we don't draw outside of the shape of the eye anymore, you can alpha lock the layer by sliding to the right. So we slide to the right and let it go. Now it's got this little border. This indicates that the layer is locked, so you can no longer draw outside of the content that's already in the layer. We're going to give this guy blue eyes, and we're going to go for a darker blue. We could give him greenish eyes, but I'll do dark. That's a little bit too dark. Let's go like this. We can always change them. And now we use the line art as a slight guide. Let's go a little bit lighter here. I want to do just the color though. We'll leave the lighting and the shading and all that for the next steps. And for the eyeballs themselves, let's just go fully black. I tend to not do this, but we'll see. If anything, I'm gonna end up adding a few highlights to the eyes, and it should kind of help offset that. So if we remove the line art, you can see mainly what we've missed was adding the mouth. So let's do that. Let's use a darker red, and we'll go for a redder red, if that makes sense. I'm just going to, you can't really see it because I'm drawing under the line art, which is pretty dense at this point, but I will show you when we turn the line art layer off. See, I just filled it in with one solid line. So that will indicate the mouth location, and we can paint within that when we need to. What's left? Well, we can alpha lock these branches, and I can mix some colors. I can grab that orange by color picking it and make it slightly lighter to push it further into the background. Here, let's grab the blue, go over it, lower the opacity to like 30, and let's grab this color. So you see what I did there? I grabbed the blue, I lowered the opacity, went over the wood with one stroke, and now it gave me this gray blue. And I'm gonna use this gray blue. Well, it's just, yeah, it's pretty gray bluish tint of a color. And I'm going to put it on a select few branches to help push them into the background. Now I'm gonna lower the opacity, go over one more stroke of blue, and now you see it gave me a not so bluish blue. It's like a tongue twister. But now I'm gonna go over with this color over other branches, and again, actually this top left one I'll just leave it really dark, but again I will use it to kind of push the branches into the background. Hopefully you can see the progress here. Alright, I think this actually concludes the color layer. Now the final video will be where we go in and start, well actually, man, I'm so bad at deciding what needs to be done. Let's lower the opacity down to 35 on our line art layer. Let's unlock our eyeball layer and go in and do a little bit of touching up. So the reason I'm doing this right now is we're still going to need to do this when right before we start all the colors, or all the blending and the shading and applying everything there. So we're gonna do the cleaning up of the lines right now, since it's essentially the same type of process. You can do it. Make sure that you're not picking up colors that have line art over it, because they're a little bit skewed from having line art over it. Alright, now it's important to also remember to switch to the layers that you're trying to fix. So the beak right here has this little dip. I want to go in with a brush. Remember, I color picked right here, not right here, just because that's the actual color of the layer. If you remove the line art, see, that's what's left. And if I was to color pick the slightly darker yellow, that's being affected by the transparent or partially transparent line art layer above it, then it would affect what color I'm using. Now I can also use an eraser and clean up some of the edges. It's okay here if I cut a little bit more than, well, actually it is okay, but in this case it's not, because then it makes his mouth look like he has some sort of weird bite. Hey, we pretty much drew a banana on the bottom. So just finishing up here, doing a little bit of line cleaning, and we can do a lot of that to sort of improve the piece overall, but I think what's left is to just do a little bit of adjusting on the trees in the back right here, so that, well, that was too much cutting off of it. I'm gonna raise the opacity and just trim them down a little bit on both sides, because these branches would be like too heavy to be supported by the rest of the branch. I don't know. And it's kind of ugly having that big rounded tip. Obviously you could use that as a design thing if you wanted to, but personally I'm just not too fond of it. So we're gonna go in and we're gonna cut them up. So just I don't know, vary it up. Trees are a living thing. You have to keep that in mind. It's definitely not a it's not a mathematical, you know, nothing's measured out. It's not geometric, it's organic, right? So a lot of variation and pretty much scribbles will make it more believable than having it super planned out. So we'll do a little bit of weaving and cutting and pasting and whatever else. We didn't really use the selection tool on this layer because we didn't need to. Most of that process is done like during line art and, you know, when you're adding other elements. Alright, the bird, the color layer is complete. Let me take off the line art for a sec and we can kind of see what we've got here. And this is already step 2 and it's completed. So I will finish up this painting in the third part, where we will add shading and lighting and other atmospheric elements. So thanks for joining, guys. Okay, hold on. But yeah, thanks for joining, and I will see you next time right after I fix this leg right here. Hopefully this video isn't too long either. I'm trying to keep these at like the 15-minute mark if possible, but the more complex a piece, usually the more time it'll take overall. Alright.